So, I wanted to talk about the slippery slope of just a little, just a little of that, just a little of this. So, oftentimes we may want to indulge in certain things, and then without realizing it, they can quickly become habitual or problematic. So, the key is to actually follow through on the just a little. So, not too much, not too little. This is the way of the Tao. A certain amount of something is a medicine. Too much can be a venom. So, too much sugar becomes a venom in the blood. This is why it's a problem. Though if you're out in the sun and you're lifting lots of weights or exercising or doing labor or something, your body is going to metabolize sugar like that. And so in that case, you could have more, right? But if you're being sedentary or different things like that and you're eating it, then it's just becoming a poison in your body if there's too much, right? Which it doesn't take very much in the case of sugar. So that's just one example of where something that could be good can become problematic. So another version of that is information. Too much information, if we cannot digest, assimilate, and process it, it becomes in a way a venom to our psyche. And so anything we cannot digest, metabolize, absorb, utilize efficiently, it can become a problem. It starts to bog down the system. And to the degree that system continuously gets bogged down, then the problem increases and increases and increases. So there are ways we can increase our metabolism, so to speak, both physically, but also our metabolism of emotion or our metabolism of information. And that can be done through various exercises and whatnot. So the thing with this all is that how much is enough? How much do we really need? What do we really need? And that's really an inner exploration of what is called for in the moment. And there's a really beautiful thing here, because sometimes things that we might not think we want can actually be a medicine. And there are situations where even having like a cookie or something can be medicinal because it's so nourishing for us on a deep level. So then it comes down to, well, how many cookies is good? Is it one cookie? Is it two cookies? Is it the whole box of cookies? Probably not the whole box of cookies. So one of my teachers, he has a really good way of navigating these types of behaviors. And I do not recall his name at the moment. I guess he's not really a direct teacher of mine, more so someone I heard in passing. Anyways, he said, first, when we have a behavior, we pause and notice it. We just observe it. So we assess it. And so let's say it's he gave the example of a cigarette. So let's say you're craving a cigarette. And so you pause and then you assess and you observe what is the most likely outcome of the cigarette. And so the most likely outcome is maybe you get some kind of a dopamine hit, maybe you feel whatever you feel from it. And then also your lungs are going to take a certain detriment from the smoke going into them. And so there are certain consequences. You're going to probably smell like smoke. So those are some assessments that you can make. And, completely neutrally, you're just saying, okay, this is what's going to happen if I take this action. And so now that we've assessed, now we choose a loving alternative. And so here's where it gets interesting. That loving alternative could be to do something different. Maybe take some deep breaths. That's your loving alternative. Or your loving alternative could be maybe only smoke half of the cigarette and share the rest with somebody else. And so that loving alternative is for you to determine. And then from here, he suggests that you take the easiest action. And this does something very, very interesting. When we take the easiest action, it's the problem with behavioral change is oftentimes there can be lots of shame and different challenges that we run into in that sense, where we end up beating ourselves up and then we're still doing the behavior, and then it's like this downward spiral loop, which is not that helpful. So if we take the easiest action, what he said happens is that it might be the 100th cigarette. You're going and you're taking the easiest action every time you're smoking it. You go through the process, you're pausing, you assess, you create your loving alternative, and then every time it's easier for you to just, okay, well, I'm aware maybe it's causing some problems, but I'm just going to do it anyway. But at least you're doing it consciously. You're consciously choosing. And then he said, but on that 100th cigarette, there comes a moment where, wait a minute, actually now the easiest action is to take a few deep breaths, because I began to reassociate what the actual outcome is. So with behavioral change, it's perceived pleasure versus perceived pain. If I take X action, there's a certain perceived pleasure reward that I will get based on oftentimes the stuff deep in our past. For example, the maybe when we were a kid, our parents, when we had a challenging emotion, they would give us something sweet to calm us down. And so that becomes our pattern of, okay, when there's a challenging situation, I go for something sweet and that calms me down. And that's a pattern, okay? That can develop. That's just one example. And so as we observe that pattern and we can see the many facets of it, we can know that it might not be that good anymore. Maybe it's not working anymore. It's not working that well. And so we need to reevaluate. Maybe it's actually causing us harm now. Maybe certain patterns that we're playing out are actually causing disruption in our life. And that we can only find through actually assessing the outcome of what's being accomplished here. And so my teacher, he says, any repeated, or an addiction, his definition is any repeated behavior that does not produce the desired result. So the desired result from eating cookies is likely to feel good and calm in that example. The desired result is probably not to get sick, lower your immunity, poison your body, potentially put on some weight. These kinds of things are probably not the desired result. And so if that's the case, then the behavior is in need of some adaptation. And so to do that, it is important to become consciously aware of, if I take X action, what is the actual outcome? Okay, maybe a momentary sense of pleasure, sensory pleasure, and then maybe followed by pain. Like I was hiking with a friend of mine, and long story short, she ate a bunch of sugar that day, and then she felt absolutely terrible. And we helped her just, drink some water, let it through, but ultimately she had to process that sugar through her body, and she was in deep pain because it had actually become a venom in her system. And so now there's an association of pain. And so anyone who's had an experience where maybe they ate something and then it didn't really sit well and that didn't work so well for them, well, their association with that experience is, if I do X, I eat that, then there's pain. And so they're not going to do that anymore, most likely. And so as we begin to reassociate our patterns with the actual outcome of what happens, if I do X action, is this actually bringing me an improvement in my life, or is this causing problems? And when we can see that clearly, the decision is very, very simple, and it actually happens naturally. So that's where that pausing and assessing process comes in, because you're making the pattern consciously aware instead of just a subconscious pattern that, oh, I have desire impulse, and then I grab X, and then you consume X, or you do X, and whatever. It's now consciously aware. So yeah, that's a long-winded way to say it's a slippery slope to just do a little. And the key with all of this is not about the actual action, it's about our relationship to it, and is it the appropriate timing? And then also, is this behavior supporting your own greater evolution, or is it diminishing your evolution? And there's no right or wrong, but by becoming consciously aware of these different aspects, your life will begin to improve gradually. So keep bringing things into awareness, keep being honest with yourself. If you need help, find someone who can see into your situation in a way that they're able to guide you and illuminate things that maybe are in the depths of your psyche that are potentially harder to access. So yeah, have fun exploring that and explore your perceived pleasures and perceived pain. I'll just add one more note with that. There can be, even with exercise, for example, physical exercise, some people associate that with pain, so they're not going to do it. Anyone who's exercised long enough, though, has likely developed a relationship with exercise where they enjoy it because they get a perceived sense of pleasure from it. And so, for many people to start a healthy habit actually is challenging because the idea of doing the thing is more painful usually than actually doing the thing. And if you just did it, then you'd realize, well, actually, it's a pleasurable experience in the long run, and it's actually highly beneficial. And so that's another example of the perceived pleasure and pain in action. So enjoy and happy lives, happy days.